I love painting acrylics, starting off just with a white canvas and sketching in the drawing using a brush and some diluted paint. And I've got a high horizon here and I'm just sketching in a path, and this is all from my imagination. And one of my biggest tips actually for painting is don't necessarily have a photograph to start with. Use your imagination so you don't have the pressure of actually copying the photograph. So I'm actually going to paint the sky here using some blue. Any blue will do, with a little bit of white and a touch of red. As you can see, the colours I've got on the right hand side there, I've got warm and cool primary colours. So I've got an ultramarine and a Prussian blue, I've got an alizarin crimson and a cadmium red. I've also got a warm yellow and a cool yellow. And I've got a green and some white. So it's a really simple colour palette and you can get so many colours here. So this is a little bit of the blue and red with a touch of the green. And you'll find actually if you mix green with the alizarin crimson, you get almost a black colour. So it's quite nice. And if you mix green and red, you get brown. So it's quite a nice way of learning to paint, teaching yourself almost. So I'm using a flat 1-inch synthetic brush here to paint in some distant trees. And now I'm painting in some grasses here. This is all on the dry canvas and the paint is slightly diluted. This is what is known as an underpainting. The importance of an underpainting is, one for me, is to warm up and to kind of get to know your picture. The other is that it's really tricky to paint on a white surface. If you're using the paint sort of without water, diluting it, you can get little white speckly bits coming through. So you've got to kind of paint over the top all over again. This way you kind of set the composition, set the tonal values, and you can really free up, loosen up. This is painting. This isn't copying photographs. You can express yourself this way as well. So I'm just painting in some blue mixed with white for the water, and I'm mixing up a little bit more blue here for the distant trees, just adding in a little bit of lighter tones here using a round brush here. So with any sort of painting, I like to work large to small, back to front, especially in landscape paintings. And here now I am building up now. The underpainting has dried. And I'm painting now without any water mixed with the paint, wet on dry with my flat 1-inch brush. Mixing in some white now with the ultramarine here with a pinch of red, and just painting in some clouds. Again, this is from my imagination, and I just like to sort of blend the acrylics here. And you'll find that you have to work pretty fast with acrylics sometimes because they do dry so very quickly, but you can buy retarders to slow them down, or just really load your brush with lots of paint and just go for it. So I've mixed up some yellow and white there for the clouds, and now I've mixed up a little bit of pink, blue and white to create some shadows for the clouds. And I'm kind of blending this wet in wet with a round brush. And then I'm blending with my fingertips there to make it look more natural and soft in the clouds. Using a little bit more white now mixed with the yellow and the pink, and adding a little bit more paint on top to create some more light in the cloud. So I've kind of created the shadows there, and then I'm adding the light. You notice there I wet my fingertip just to introduce a little bit of moisture to help me blend the clouds. So I'm working my way down now. So I'm painting over this underpainting using some green. So I've mixed some blue and yellow together, and I'm painting wet on dry using the flat brush. Now my composition may change. I'm kind of going with the flow, going with my imagination almost. I'm adding a little bit of the warm yellow now just to warm up that green and make it lighter in tonal value, just varying my colours here, working my way down in these fields left and right. Adding some more of the sort of more cooler yellow. You could use lemon yellow or cadmium yellow pale, and blending with my fingertips. Always load that brush so you have plenty of paint. What you find with acrylics, because as I said earlier, they do dry fast. And if they do, they kind of break down and crumble a little bit. And that's the time to stop painting, allow it to dry, and then you can begin to work on top. I'm adding a little bit more of the crimson here, just to make the green look a sort of a warmish brown. Added a little bit of green to that as well. So it's amazing what the different colours you can get. And I'm just painting this sort of on the edge of the riverbank. Wet into wet, a little bit more green and Prussian blue to make a darker green, painting this wet into wet with my flat 1-inch brush. So they're quite abstracty marks, but it kind of looks like a landscape. So I like to make these really kind of broad sort of shapes, not committing myself to anything because you can change things. So this way is a nice loose way of working, and you're sort of building up dark to light in a way. So adding a little bit more blue to the water using the cobalt blue and white. Here, wet on dry, using a sort of a 1/2-inch brush. Just adding a little bit more as it goes off into the distance there. So I've allowed my painting to dry, and I'm going to start working on this sort of mid-stage of the painting. So building up some more details, adding a little bit of the ultramarine with a little bit of the green, working with a smaller round brush, wet on dry, painting some distant trees. So the reason why they're more bluey in colour is because I want them to recede, so they look further away. Warmer colours come forward, cooler colours recede. But I'm adding a few sort of darker blues here and there, so you could use a little bit of the Prussian mixed with the green as well, but keeping it cool. And adding some white to keep some of those tonal values a bit lighter. And it's a really fun way of sort of just creating different shapes here and using almost the belly of the brush to create some textures as well. So this is a little bit of Prussian blue, which is a very dark blue, really useful blue. And I'm just sort of tapping my fingertips over the top of this paint just to sort of smudge it and make it look more natural and to blend it as well. Using that Prussian blue, you can add a touch of crimson in it just to take out the blue sort of colour to tone it down. And I'm just sort of shaping my painting, wet on dry, and just adding some details and bushes here and there using my round synthetic brush. Just working my way down here to the foreground. So I've warmed up the colour, adding some yellow to that blue, but also varying the tonal values, got in mid-tones and darker tonal values. So I'm having fun here, making the marks bigger so they come forward, and it sort of creates depth in the painting, adding this warmer yellow on top, wet in wet, to really warm those colours up, to bring them forward as well, keeping those shapes nice and big, keeping everything looking really natural, scrubbing that paint on and just really kind of enjoying it and sort of creating something out of my imagination. So I'm using white on its own now, using that round small brush, painting wet on dry some highlights in the water here and there. Bigger marks in the foreground, smaller marks as it goes off into the distance. And I'm just blending now with a damp brush and my fingertips just to push that back a little bit. And adding a little bit more blue here and there, that's ultramarine mixed with white, again blending with my fingertips. I've added some white to the Prussian blue and yellow, creating some nice lighter grasses on the edge of the riverbank and in the bushes here and there using the small round brush. I'm adding a little bit of the red now to the green, and it gets a lovely sort of warm sort of green but also earthy sort of colour. Just painting that wet in wet here and there, so really varying the colours with that small round brush. Adding a little bit of Prussian blue here on the edge of the water and in the water to create some movement and reflections. I've also added some white to that Prussian blue as well, and just adding it to the edge of the riverbank there to create sort of shadows and also some reflections. A little bit more of the Prussian blue mixed with the crimson there for a lovely dark colour. Using a small round brush to paint some tree trunks and branches using the Prussian blue mixed with the alizarin crimson. Wet on dry, and remember, less is more. So adding a few highlights here and there using the lighter, cooler yellow, and then sort of blending with my fingertips. I think I overdid it a little bit there. I'm just using some water just to blend that back a little. Adding a few more lighter grasses in the foreground using the yellow mixed with white, and again blending with my fingertips. Using the brush to kind of print with to create some wildflowers there, and a little bit more as it goes off into the distance. So I've warmed up some of my sort of colours for the grasses, adding the red to the green here and there, letting my brush dance around this painting. So a few more sort of lighter greens here. That's the yellow, the Prussian blue, and some white, and again blending with my fingertips there. It's to create a light against dark with those distant trees, and just to lead the eye into the painting. So just using that brush, adding that colour here and there, few more lights, again letting that brush sort of just skip around the painting. Few more darks and lights in the water to create light and dark reflections, and keep those horizontal as well, and that really does lead the eye into the painting. Just adding a little bit of highlight right at the horizon there and blending with my fingertips just to lead the viewer from the foreground to the distance. Adding a few more lighter grasses, wet on dry, using that yellow, and then having a spatter. To spatter, you need to dilute your paint to make it easier. So I'm actually going to spatter a little bit of white on its own here to create little wildflowers in the foreground, just tapping the brush. And it creates details as well, and depth, because you've got more details in the foreground. I'm adding some highlights to the clouds, wet on dry, with my fingertips, just with white paint. And just adding a few more details, wet on dry, to finish my painting. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to get updates of my latest tutorials. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.